Thank you everyone for joining here. We're going to get started right now. Hopefully you can all see my screen. Let me know if you can't. Uh, Thank you all for joining this webinar. I'm Rob Carson. I'm the CEO of SemperSec, and today we are lucky to have Art. So he has a competitive beard, but if you
It's
meet us in real
trimmed.
person, I do look like his little brother. I'm not gonna lie. I'm a big dude, but Art could have played for the Green Bay Packers. I'm just saying. So anyhow, Art, you want to do a quick intro on yourself?
Yeah. I'm Ardo Kane. This shirt is very loud on this webcam. I just realized that. I probably should have picked something a little quieter, but anyway, so me with my loud shirt. I am a VP of Incident Response and Cybersecurity at Airiam. Have been leading our incident response team for the last 6 years, and before that have 25 years of IT and cybersecurity. So right now we are partnered with SemperSec to handle all of our compliance goodies, and I'm spending the rest of my days in the front lines, fighting incidents.
It's you are, and Airiam's a trusted partner. We love them, and this is the reason why we brought him to this webinar is we want to talk about implementing controls. And Art's a realist, and talk about, hey, pros and cons. Let me show you my agenda here. We're going to talk about disaster recovery strategies, pros and cons of outsourcing it, detection capabilities, things like that. What we should look for.
Mhm.
If you have questions, feel free to shoot them in the chat. That'd be awesome. And we'll get started here. So, Art, first off, let's talk. Actually, before we talk about disaster recovery strategies, one thing I want to talk about for all the people that are watching is I got a slide right here, and I want to show that, hey, whether you're a federal contractor, you're dealing with federal stuff, you're dealing with ISO, you got SOC 2, everything we're talking about overlaps. Everyone needs disaster recovery. Everyone needs to be able to do incident handling, things like that. And if you don't trust me, I've got a slide for you, but we're not going to get into that. So let's go back to the agenda. So Art, let's talk about disaster recovery. So uh what do you see as some of the primary weaknesses in people's strategy?
Most people don't actually know what they have. So understanding what their assets are and really, uh, what systems and services are critical to the company, and then what servers and data and network access back those up. Really having that kind of tree built so they understand my ERP system requires these 15 servers and this networking to exist. Really, that understanding documented, is a crucial part of being able to recover. Because or else you're just going to recover the ERP server and think that, hey, we're going to be able to operate. And really, it's all the rest of the supporting infrastructure that most of them don't have documented. So having a good asset list and really an understanding of really kind of how critical that system is, what that system supports, what pieces need to, what integrations need to exist, and having that documented and having that document not just sitting on your file server, but sitting somewhere like in SharePoint Online or somewhere where you can access it when your on-prem environment has been attacked. So if your file server is all encrypted, your DR plan with your asset list is encrypted also, and then you're kind of dead in the water.
So, but my stuff's in AWS, so I'm good, right?
So actually, I mean, we see most of our incidents coming in through AWS now. So, AWS and Azure. So, just being in the cloud doesn't really mean anything these days. There's this kind of implied redundancy that everybody kind of believes, but yeah, AWS and Azure make it clear that they're not responsible for anything that happens to your environment. So, and a threat actor can run through and destroy everything you have, and really that you're the one who is responsible for understanding what you had, have it well documented so you can rebuild those VPCs and put those servers up again and those serverless instances and everything and rebuild everything from scratch. If you don't have a playbook to be able to do that, then it becomes a real manual effort. Like, hey, what did this server need? Did it have an S3 bucket it was talking to? Did we have a direct attached disk? Like, if you don't have that stuff documented, rebuilding it can be a real struggle. Also, and I keep mentioning threat actors because that's what I'm dealing with a lot lately. But human error is a thing too, and it's really easy to nuke stuff in the cloud. And so if you have a sysadmin that just makes a mistake, sometimes you need that same playbook that you would use if there was a malicious threat actor destroying stuff, in order to really rebuild your environment in the cloud.
Okay. So sorry, just triggered a question, but
Hmm.
you talk about like basically backing up those scripts, like if you're in a DevOps
Hmm.
environment, like because you still got to recreate it.
Yep.
Okay.
And not only that, but so those of you who are using DevOps principles and are using kind of that CI/CD platform in order to deploy, don't count on that system working.
Yeah, back up that cookbook.
Exactly,
Reference your
exactly.
check.
We've seen where the CI/CD platform is taken down, and then we're like, okay, we need to relaunch basically 3,000 resources in the cloud, and we have no CI/CD platform. What's our strategy now? And usually it's rebuild that CI/CD platform and make sure that all of that is backed up, and all the supporting cookbooks if you're using Chef, whatever, Puppet, etc. All of your stuff for your server configuration, as well as the stuff that's like in the CI/CD platform, that you're using. So everything that's related to your DevOps tooling really needs to be considered in that backup, and that disaster recovery scenario.
What about so what about asynchronous backup? So like the biggest threat, because one of the things we all got to worry, you got to worry about ransomware, right? How do you advise people so they don't back up the ransomware?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, most backups that we're using are asynchronous, but really, you want to make sure that there's an immutable copy of that backup. So, and what I mean by immutable is someone can't change it. The threat actor can't delete it. You can't accidentally delete it. It's a copy there, and so you want kind of a asynchronous copy that you can restore to. And let's say you're taking a backup every 15 minutes or every half hour, and you have one copy of that every day going to an immutable storage block. So if something is really tampered with and you need to go to immutable storage, you can go there. But I usually lean away from any kind of live sync. For the reason is almost every incident that we've had to deal with where there's a DR site and there's just VMware replicating between sites, they're counting on their DR site to have good data. But when ransomware has happened, that DR site is also corrupted. Uh, we also see with the SANs, everybody's counting on being able to flip back to a snapshot on their SAN, and those snapshots can be tampered with, and snapshotting capability on the SAN can be turned off and tampered with. So there are mitigations now because it's happened so much. Some SAN storage companies will sell a license for a kind of an offline vault, so that to make that snapshot immutable so it can't be deleted. But people that are relying on snapshotting and just replication between production and DR sites with a live sync tend to be in trouble when it's actually a ransomware event.
So, and for those of you listening, for any of you who happen to be my customers, the first answer to my next question is, what do your contracts say? But so my question is are like, how many backups? How long should I keep my backups? It's not like wine; it doesn't get better with time. We got privacy
Right.
controls. We've got these DSARs. People want to be deleted. How how long? But let's put the contracts aside. From a real life, if you've got ransomware or you have uh, if you have a problem,
Yep.
how far back should you actually go? Because like when I hear like I've got 3 years of backups, I'm like, are you really going to restore from 3 years ago? Like,
Right. Yeah, I would say that anything that's that historical is more useful if there's a single file that someone needed. You deleted something and then your auditor next year is like, "Hey, uh give me the show me your configuration from last year," and then you can pull that out of the backup, that kind of thing. But usually in a restore situation, you want the data to be as current as possible. So usually a couple weeks is good, and the reason a couple weeks is, the threat actor may have initial access, 90 days ago, but usually they're not corrupting your environment until, uh, you know, today, yesterday. Usually you notice it pretty badly in a ransomware event. In another, in a state level threat actor event, any kind of other access, just assume that you're going to have to do some inspection and cleanup from your restore. So I would not restore back to 6 months ago because you realized that initial access was 5 months ago or something like that. I would still restore to current and just make sure you clean up and contain and eradicate that threat actor from your
That whole
environment.
eradication thing of that incident response plan,
Yep.
that's always gets me, you know. What about testing? So,
Mhm,
I've I tell people like actually test your backups. Like I
mhm,
don't want to see like just because the system says it's good, are you
mhm,
sure it's backing up what you think it is?
mhm.
Like, how do you go about that? And then I guess my second question is like, okay, there's one thing to go set it all up. Why would you use a service versus not?
Right, right, right. And there's another piece to this as well as when you brought up testing, it made me think of it is often these backup infrastructures are being attacked by the threat actor as well. So in addition to just recovery testing, testing the security of your backup infrastructure is important. Or else you may go to restore and Veeam or Zerto or whatever you're using does not exist anymore, or and your backup copies don't exist anymore. But as far as backing up and doing recovery testing, we usually like to do it every day. So we're doing recovery testing once a day. I may be backing you up depending on your data set. It may be daily, it may be, every 15 minutes, but we'll do a recovery test every day. So basically after the backup, it'll spin up, a VM and make sure that it boots and the services that are supposed to be running are running when it boots. And if it has dependencies on another server, you can do a recovery test with a group of servers in kind of a container in order to verify that everything's working. But I would test very regularly, and I like daily because you know what what if it's next week and my last recovery test was a week ago. Now I potentially am losing a week's worth of
Well, and that
functionality.
sysadmin made a change. Someone did something because the firewall was a
Right,
problem, and now
right.
you have a new issue, right?
Yep.
Like,
And just the backup being successful and the getting that like log isn't enough for me now. Like, because I've had so many of those where backup successful, but you actually go to restore and it's unrestorable. So, I'm going more off of the, recoverability and that testing to validate that we're good.
yeah, I always tell people start slow. First DR test is going to be a dumpster fire of adventure if
Mhm.
you've never done one. But so, like, how does the service help
Yeah. So, I mean, well, there's a lot of ways to think about a service, but it's with a
for disaster recovery? Ooh.
right. So if you're like looking at disaster recovery as a service, where people are kind of almost using a SaaS model for disaster recovery, we have a product like that, but there are several companies that do. So there's some risks to it, but there's a lot of advantages as well. These people are doing, that recovery testing to that level, and they're usually using immutable storage because really their butt's on the line if they're not, and something happens. They're literally their entire liability is around the recoverability of your data. So they are,
A little
incredibly
more
invested.
vested,
Exactly, exactly.
and
It's
you've
what they
got
live
someone to
for.
blame.
Exactly.
Um,
They know
no, that
what they're
makes
doing.
sense.
Yeah.
All right.
But there's also some economies of scale there, where you're not having to have a team of sysadmins managing your backup and recovery. You're not having to invest in a lot of storage on-prem, if you're using a cloud service, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that you can get as a plus
Okay.
from that.
Let's talk. Let's go right. This is a perfect segue into incident response and
Mhm.
a SOC or a rent a SOC,
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
So, implementing controls, right? Like, for some people, I'm like, hey, create a recurring ticket and just checking your events once a week is better than no events ever.
Mhm.
Like, but let's talk about detection and response. Like,
Mhm.
so there's a lot of cyber bullshit out there, right?
Yes, yes.
And it's going to save the world. It's going to help us both grow hair. It's going to be awesome. Like, what's your thought on that piece?
Yeah, so when you say the bullshido, it's exactly right. So what I consider most SOCs that you will talk to are really doing alerting as a service.
Like
So
human pager duty?
exactly, exactly. They're hooked into your Sentinel-1 or your CrowdStrike or whatever your EDR is. They're hooked into maybe your firewall logging, maybe your identity logging. But and they have this all going into a SIM, and then they have a level one analyst who's getting paid $10 an hour look at everything. And when something happens, they basically send you an email or a phone call saying you're on fire. And I've had this happen a lot. We've worked with partners like that in the past, and at 3 a.m. they're emailing us, letting us know that one of our customers is on fire, and so we stop using providers like that because of that. As we've learned some hard lessons about the ecosystem, that a lot of when you talk to a SOC provider, oh yeah, we have an SLA, we'll detect it, everything will be great, we'll respond, and you ask what their response is. Make sure you ask those questions. What is your response? And if the response, oh yeah, our playbook is, we're gonna isolate the host in Sentinel-1, and then we're gonna, call you or email you that you have a fire going on. That seems like a great response, right? But one of the things you need to think about is, okay, if they're getting to this machine within our network and they're isolating this host in Sentinel-1, the threat actor still has access to the network likely. They're already inside our network when they're attacking that machine. So there's
Hmm.
some more response needed, and that's where I've seen that get dropped a lot with these Renaissance, is that they're just like, okay, cool, closed ticket, and it's taken care of, it's isolated, but there's likely a threat actor in the environment still. They may have creds to the environment, may have VPN access, may have whatever, and then the next day you wake up and the customer's calling because all their services are down and they have
Like
ransomware, something like that.
they got to containment, but they never got to eradication.
Exactly, exactly.
So, like, and that's one of the things that, like, so I've sat on both sides of these things, and I've found you get what you put into it.
Hmm.
Like, so if there's two parts. One thing you said too is like, oh, they're going to isolate the host. So
Hmm.
I've had some customers that are like, they're afraid you're going to break something, you're going to stop something from
Hmm.
happening, which is like what you're paying them to do.
Yep.
Because one of the things is like, I've had socks that don't even do that. They
Right.
just tell me you're having a bad day.
Hmm.
They don't actually shut anything off.
Yep. I've
Um,
had that.
what's your advice? So if you're looking at an MSSP, like one, you talked about like what the playbooks are, but like how does the customer, how does somebody actually get value out of it, right?
Yeah, I think that is one of the key things that we've kind of evolved to start kind of thinking about, is when there's other people managing components of this relationship, whether it's an MSP, an MSSP, whether there's, you're just outsourcing to a SOC and they're not really an MSSP, but they're just a SOC as a service provider. There's, in addition, you can't just ship your risk. You want to, but you need to really understand that this is an extension of your company, and you need to build a relationship with them and really form expectations with them. Say, and almost every SOC provider, they'll have, rules of engagement for every client that they have. And if you haven't gone out of the way to set that up with them, then they're just going to default to whatever their default behavior is.
Yeah,
So,
they're not
it,
gonna. It's one of those like garbage in, garbage out, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So you need to invest time in actually managing that partner and say, okay, these are the expectations I have. When an alert comes in, I want you to call me. I want you to call so and so. I want you, and let us know. In addition, I want you to, launch your normal SOAR automated responses, try to contain the threat, eradicate if you can, and then give me an after action report of what you've done so far so I know where to pick up the ball. Like, being clear with them about that. And if they're another thing to ask about is if that MDR company or that SOC or whatever the services that you've purchased has incident response capabilities and whether they are included in the price that you're paying. A lot of times they're not. So you're getting that alerting as a service, but once they engage their IR team, you may be paying $400 an hour for that IR team to respond. So understanding what you're getting for with those services is really important when you're buying a service. But as you're continuing to manage them, say, okay, I do want you to engage the incident response team when there's an incident. I want you to react. I want you to take care of it and contain and eradicate the threat. Send me the bill. Like that's, I'd rather deal with a $1,600 bill, a $10,000 bill than a down network that I have to spend the next month rebuilding.
That's
So
a great point, right?
yeah,
Having the incident response capability,
yep,
because telling you you're screwed doesn't really get you that far. Like,
exactly.
uh, that's interesting. So, one of the things I'm a compliance guy, so I'm gonna go into this. Like, one of the things I've seen with MSPs and MSSPs that customers use is that some of them, they're basically using shared accounts.
Hmm.
Okay, and some of that makes sense, like from a like licensing perspective, whatever you want to call it. Like, hey, we have one or two accounts, but you know what would you see? One of the things I've seen is like making sure how they protect it on the back end,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Because like, for anyone listening to this, like, uh, uh, you know, some for sec, we do this for cybersecurity companies. Nobody is perfect.
Hmm.
Nobody does this stuff for fun. Like maybe maybe a few of us do, but most of us don't. And it's an understanding like, hey, how do they protect your access? Do they have that log of
Right.
who accessed the system? Was that protected by MFA? Like, how do they get in? Right?
Right. 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 Yeah, there are a lot of solutions now that used to not exist for that. That really allow an MSP or an MSSP to log in and have roles that you've assigned them or pre-assigned them, and you can also give them just-in-time capabilities too. So if they want to escalate to being a domain administrator or something, you can authorize that access. But where it will integrate with Active Directory and let them still have unique users for each user that needs
Hmm.
to log in. So there are technologies like that now that will support so you don't have to use shared accounts. And so that is possible. Not everybody's equipped with that. One of the more common things that we do is we'll set up a different tech account for each tech in the customer environment, but we're not going to put their names. It's not going to say like Bob Wilson. It'll say Tech One, and it'll say Tech 2, and it'll say Tech 3. And internally, we have each of those tech numbers assigned to a person. So, you may get 20 tech
Hmm.
accounts set up in your environment. In AD, you'll sit there and see 10 tech accounts, and then there'll be MFA and everything tied to that with Duo, et cetera. But those are unique users so that we can trace what Tech 1 did
That makes
afterwards.
sense. Well,
Yep.
and for those of you listening, like going, well, they can't be like they're not anonymous on the back end, and they should be able to tell you exactly
Right.
what person
Yeah.
has it at any. You can do an audit and check that at any time. But
Yep.
MS socks are where people break their bones. It's where they make their bones in cybersecurity. It's where a lot of people get started, and
Hmm.
so there's a lot of turnover.
Yep.
You have an analyst that's there for more than 2 years, like they're either getting promoted or they're going to be working someplace else
Yep.
because you've either franchise tagged them or they're getting poached.
Absolutely, absolutely. And
That's just normal.
one of the reasons we use that tech identifier, tech 1, tech 2, tech 3, is because we have been in incidents where it does have our names, where we've given our names to the customer created them in AD, threat actor sees these new accounts being created, our names, and then the threat actor tries attacking us and tries individuals, looking them up on LinkedIn, looking them up on Google, finding their Facebook, trying to attack them and their families because they're involved on an incident response for you. So we're trying to separate their name from that situation. So that's why we're using Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3 in order to accomplish that.
Well, it makes sense. No, and I tell you, going through that monthly report over and over again.
Mhm,
So let's say, hey, I'm a small company.
mhm.
Like, you got, you're big enough to get certified and stuff like that, but like, what should people expect to pay for a sock? Because pricing is all over the board.
Yep, yeah. I think it really depends on your needs. So there are a lot of different services that a SOC will offer, and the you'll see kind of like a baseline, which is almost like Sentinel-1 vigilance, which is really kind of them managing your Sentinel-1 or your EDR and just responding to that. But there's no integration of identity into the situation, no email security. They're not looking at any of that. They're not looking at anything that's happening with your cloud environments, anything that's happening with your network. So all they're seeing is the endpoints that you've installed EDR on. So that might be okay for some customers, especially a remote only company where everybody's working from home and they're having a laptop, there's not really other infrastructure to manage. So that might be okay. But usually when there's a compliance need, you need a certain amount of logging, you need firewall logging, you need things like that. Then you need to really get a more advanced SOC service. So instead of $5 an endpoint, like you'd be getting with something like Sentinel-1 Vigilance, you're looking at more like 35 for a full package with, SIM, with, SOAR playbooks and integration with all of your log sources, and you think, okay, $35 a user, and I've seen 50, $60 a user. So it's in that range is what you'll see with those kind of more advanced packages that have integrations with everything. And
And it's a lot
but
faster to check that block because, and this is where it's that you're waiting stuff. Like, you can do it yourself, but you weren't good at it to begin with. How much does it cost to hire and train a security analyst? Oh, and by the way, they're going to be gone in 2 years too.
mhm,
Um, it's just the nature of the beast versus staffing isn't your problem. It's their problem. You have the professionals, plus you're getting credit. You bring in the sim stuff. Now you're hitting some of the requirements for what's it called? Oh, combining logs together, being able
yeah,
to
centralized logging.
centralized logging. Sorry, I don't,
Yep,
it's been a long day, I guess. I don't know.
yep,
Centralized logging where you're able to, understand what's going on. Hey, firewall here, endpoint here. Do you see? You're able to correlate those logs.
yep.
Um, and that's so. How do you train an I mean, because that's the thing is like people want to do it themselves, but let's say you're doing the SIM services, right?
Mhm.
How do you advise people to actually get their SIM tuned?
Yeah. So that. I mean, when you first deploy a SIM, let's say Splunk or Elastic or whatever you're choosing, you're looking at usually months to years before you get it really the way you want it. So, in advance, the way to think about it is really kind of set up some requirements and say, okay, these are the log sources I'm going to have coming in. I want to have them map against MITRE ATT&CK so that we can do correlations against that. And if we see stuff coming in through firewall and stuff coming in through email and everything, and it's correlating to an attack, we want it to map it out. let's say I want to be able to, let's say there's an integrated SOAR with the solution, and I need to build those integrations out so that it can respond in SentinelOne or in CrowdStrike or in your Palo Alto or your Fortinet, or to disable users in AD or Azure AD. All this takes time, these integrations to set up. And then once you get them, you'll find all those integrations set up. You'll find that, okay, this SIM is almost like worthless because I have,
Telling you were
500.
screwed 6 months ago.
Exact. Well, I mean, not only that, but there's 500,000, log entries coming in faster than you can blink, and the correlations aren't really happening automatically for you yet.
Mhm.
So it's just suddenly it's a log engine. You're looking at a syslog server basically, and so it takes time to actually have those correlations start to get built out for it to really start to show you some hotspots, and usually you need an expert that is actually looking at it and kind of building out stuff as well and saying, okay, these are the things we want to see. We want to see this. Let's bring this to our attention and ignore the rest of it. Some sims are better than others as far as kind of using AI and machine learning to kind of uh, do that for you. But in the end, it's knowing what you want is an important part of this, and building
You
out
find you have to interview
expectations.
customers to go, all right, like, let's walk through your infrastructure. Cause like, I mean, I remember, back when I was on the other side,
Hmm.
we had it set up because we had, 4 or 5 different data center or 6 different data centers,
Hmm.
and we had, probably 3 or 4 different offices.
Hmm.
And our one of the rules we wanted a high priority is like, if someone's scanning these, disparate IP addresses
Hmm.
from the same IP, like,
Yep.
I want to know when are they mapping the actual company, or are they just random acts of scanning of Apache attacks?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, setting up rules like that are part of that tuning that when you get and when you get your own sim, that's part of what you have to do. The benefit of getting a service provider like an MSSP or a SOC, is that they have those built out already. They have it already tuned for themselves. So they'll just integrate their stuff with your stuff and pull it in.
Let's talk about that.
Hmm.
Because so every company out there,
Hmm.
every MSP out there is now a MSSP. Just ask them.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
cyber warriors now because they've watched, 3 seasons of NCIS Cyber, so they've pretty much got it down.
Mr. Robot. Yeah, yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, at least Mr. Robot shows it took 3 days to hack something.
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not magic, but like,
Yeah.
you know, I think that's you brought up a point. Like, so you're talking like you've you guys were an MSP, but you guys have
Hmm.
staffed
Yep.
with true cyber professionals.
Yes.
So how would you what kind of questions would you tell a customer to ask?
Yeah.
They're looking to be like, hey, you want to know, like, this is what you should vet, and it's not just art's not the single point of success.
Right.
I mean, that's the
Right.
first thing I would do is I'd be like, who else is good?
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, so when you talk to an MSSP, understand that there has been this evolution in the market. A lot of people are trying to get into becoming an MSSP. MSPs are trying to evolve into MSSPs. So there are a lot of people that say they're MSSPs that are not really MSSPs. They're just people that are good with computers, think they know and understand security. They may not have formal security education. They may not have formal security experience, and they are just branding themselves as that, and giving you an EDR solution or something like that. One of the things to be aware of is that a lot of MSSPs that kind of evolved from MSPs like that outsource their SOC. And kind of
Uh-huh.
like I mentioned, partners that we've worked with before when we were just an MSP before we built out our own SOC. That's when we found out about the alerting as a service, and that's when we found out about that. Hey, these people aren't really doing anything for us. So when you're working with an MSP that has evolved into an MSSP, that a lot of times is what you're getting. So one of the questions to ask is, do you have your own SOC or are you outsourcing? And if you are in a hybrid SOC scenario, how many people do you have on your SOC team? And how are you rotating your shifts? And, are you offering 24/7 and things
And
like
how are
that?
you doing it?
Right.
right? Because like I
Right.
remember when we started back when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was working at an
Mhm.
MSSP, and like 24/7 was basically a dude on pager duty,
Yeah.
and like
Yep.
he triaged, and it wasn't bad necessarily because he was actually like a professional, so it was better
Yes.
than outsourcing it to rent a sock.
Yep.
But understand what it is, right? And are
Yep.
they U.S. persons? Is that a thing for you? Because like they're looking at your logs, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of data in there sometimes.
And they
I've
may have
heard.
access to your environment, depending on your agreement and how it's set up. Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
No, this
So
is
yeah,
a.
with when you're talking with an MSSP, understand that a lot of them are outsourcing part of it. You may have they may have three people running SOC internally, and that may be enough for daytime operations. And then they're out, offshoring to analysts overnight. And so is that okay with you? Are you okay with offshore SOC operations? And if so, ask them, how does your service change overnight? Um, you know, because a lot of times that offshore SOC is just it's going to default to the alert as a service, and you may not get the level of service that you're looking for. And one of the realities is that almost all the cyber attacks that happen overnight. They
Why don't
happen
they attack at
while
9
we're
a.m.
sleeping.
on Tuesday when
You
like
know?
you had your first cup of coffee? It'd be a lot easier that way.
Exactly. And US holidays. Oh my gosh, like we've done incident responses on every Christmas and every Thanksgiving for the last 5 years. So it's, holiday seasons. They know we're excited to get out early on Friday and go home, and we're not going to be paying attention to our dashboards, and we're all going to be partying with our families. That's when they hit us the hardest. So asking an MSSP or a SOC provider, how you guys are handling those operations, is an important part of understanding, and not only how they're handling it, but how are they escalating to you when there's a problem, and what kind of problems need to be escalated to you. Because some of them may just say, okay, we're going to alert you when something goes on, and then you know suddenly you're getting a log entry from them saying, hey, this is a big issue, you need to worry about it. And you're looking at this log entry and you're like, I don't even know what this means. um are you a security professional? Are you going to be able to deal with that response
Hmm.
if they're sending that alert? So sometimes it's important, if you have one of those lighter weight kind of alert as a service socks, that's okay because it'll do the detection fine. It's just you're not getting response out of them. And so then you need to engage another partner for incident response when something happens. So, then it's okay. Do you have a retainer with them? Do you have an agreement with them? Are you able to just forward that email to that IR company and have them run with it? Or is it a fresh engagement? Because if it's a fresh engagement and you don't have a retainer and you don't have an existing relationship with an IR company, it might be 12 hours before you're getting the response you want.
And they've got
Now,
no essay on what's going on. They don't have any details. Good question. So let's take a pause here. Are there any questions out there from anybody in the audience here? I want to take a pause, and if you have questions, please put them in the whatever the Zoom
Q&A.
chat is,
Yep.
however that works. Uh, should be like a questionnaire or something. Um, I've got one. They're asking about certifications, right? Because all these customers, my customers especially, like they're all going through it.
Hmm.
Shit rolls up downhill, right?
Yep.
Everybody's got to get it. So
Yep.
I'll answer this from an honest perspective.
Hmm.
Not every MSSP is going to have certs. They're likely working on them, stuff like that. What I would tell you is like if that's important to you, ask them if they're willing to guarantee that within a year they'll get certified. Also, ask for the right to audit. Putting those things in there will force them to do it because you do want to make sure that they're doing the right things. However, uh, the if you go one that has all the certs, they're likely going to cost a ridiculous amount more. Because certs ain't free.
Yep.
But doesn't mean that they have bad security.
Right.
But it's the ones that aren't willing to. because like when they go, oh, it's compliance, it's just garbage.
Right.
Any middle-aged cybersecurity professional, I know when you're young, people are like, ah, this is stupid. We'll
Mhm.
tell you, well, if you can't do compliance,
Right.
what makes you think you're doing cyber,
Right.
right? And I'm just saying that from my perspective of like, you don't have to discount them. It's more, here's how you handle it.
Yep.
But I'm interested if you have thoughts on that as well, or like,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, in the US, you're going to see, you know, most SOC providers that are legit SOCs, you'll see SOC 2 or something like that around them. With a lot of MSPs that have evolved into MSSPs uh, don't have that. So that is a valid question to ask, and I love your approach about the kind of requiring that they gain that certification within a
because
year. Because
that's nobody does it for fun
right,
unless it's a barrier to sales. They aren't going to do it.
yep,
And it doesn't mean, like I said, it doesn't mean they're bad. Like any, request the right to audit,
yep,
and that's a way to mitigate that risk. Because the biggest thing you're going to care about is, okay, you have my logs. Where are they stored? How do you access them? Can they be downloaded? Especially like if they're using offshore SOC, right? Like,
yep,
because I've seen it where like you could have red light, green light, where you just have human pager duty in the Philippines or something,
yep,
and then they wake up the senior or the US person that has the different access.
yep.
Um,
But also, it's my opinion too that if the SOC them having like a SOC 2 certification really doesn't mean that they're awesome either.
that is for damn sure.
So
Like having a CISSP. Like,
exactly.
you're good at multiple choice. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I don't want to hate on it, but
E-
it's I've fired more CISSPs than none, I think.
Absolutely.
If I'm being honest. It's well no, that's the thing. It's like and in SOC 2, like that's why I'm a big fan of ISO. Because
Hmm.
ISO, as opposed to SOC 2, and that's when people are like, oh, SOC 2, they got a SOC 2. First of all, if you actually read the report and make sure it's commensurate with the scope of what services you're getting. But
Yep.
two, ISO grades you on, how you're running your program, not
Yes.
if you're perfect. And why I like that standard is like you want to have you want to create a system that allows you to identify flaws and work and to prioritize and remediate them as opposed to sitting there going, well, I have good practice. It's not best practice, but this works and I don't want to screw up my process.
Right. Right.
And,
Yeah. Yeah,
and
absolutely. And just be aware that like there are some like paper mills out there for SOC 2 for MSPs and MSSPs. So where they can step through it really easily, low bar to entry, fill
that's
out, you know,
that's a big point. Like,
yeah.
look at where are they accredited by ANAB? Do they have like because it seems like every CPA firm, I don't know how. I mean, CPAs are great people, but like, uh, do they actually have the professional training on the cybersecurity side? And a lot of times it's not the CPA actually doing it, but somebody else is signing it, which is, but if they have that professional, okay. But like, is it a paper mill?
Yep.
I've seen that with some of the GRC tools where it's
Mhm.
like you're getting pennies on the dollar and makes you wonder like, are you getting a good audit? Like I had somebody tell me they can get
Oh,
an internal audit for 3 grand, and I'm like, hey, that's awesome, and you should use them because like that's like
I
this is how
can't
long
even
it takes.
audit Active Directory for that, let
Well,
alone
yeah,
their
it's like, well, it's
whole
the
environment.
GRC tool says it's magic,
Yeah.
but you gotta like, I want to validate that like what you've got connected to it is all the things. It's like, you point Nessus at 2 servers, you can have a great score,
Yep.
you know,
Yep.
just don't point it at the entire range. Good question. Any other questions we got out there? I'm gonna take a minute here, see a few awesome people in our attendees here. Um, This is a good time to stump the chump. You want to talk ransomware, or you want to talk paying a ransom?
Oh, that's always a inflammatory relationship. I mean, a topic there, the paying a ransom.
I tell
Yeah,
people no one's going to pay. You're not going to pay a ransom until you need to pay a ransom.
absolutely. Yeah,
But that's where good backups come into play, right? If you went
yep,
back to that disaster recovery, tested it.
yep. I've worked with a lot of organizations where it's kind of their principle that, it's just their foundation is that they're not going to pay a ransom. They're, refuse to deal with terrorists, etc. But when all your critical services are down, you're losing millions of dollars a day. All of your data is tied up, encrypted, and you have no restore paths because the threat actor has attacked all your backups. Then you start thinking about it and saying, okay, our to rebuild everything we have, and to rebuild our business from scratch is going to take years. We can get critical services maybe up in the next 3 months. Can the business afford to be down that long, or are we just going to fork up $5 million to the threat actor? Um, that's a real decision that I see every week. With new customers coming with incidents, and so many of them are like, hey, we're never going to pay the ransom, and then a couple days into it, once they realize where they stand, they have to pay the ransom. So it's just a reality right now, and the threat actors are purposely doing everything they can to make sure that they get paid. That is
Make
their
it.
business model. So they're going to attack your backups, they're going to attack your storage, your snapshots, etc. They're, on almost every one of these incidents, Veeam is attacked, and Veeam's a great backup
You
technology.
got to admit, their customer service is bar none.
Yep.
Like, I've been on the phone with them, and it's like smooth jazz. I'm just like,
Yep.
they make you feel. They're like, okay, this is all I gotta do. Like, it's
Absolutely.
yeah, but it's like, can you walk away, right? Like,
Ex-
and
yep.
that's it's one of the things. Like, I tell people, make sure your stuff, if you get infected, I'm wiping your machine.
Mhm.
So if your stuff's not backed up to Google Workspace, OneDrive, whatever, like, I'm wiping it. I'm
Yep.
not messing around. It is what it is. Like, it's
Yep.
easy. It's the only way I can get around it. And then one thing, it's funny. I think it was actually a buddy of yours. He brought up a good point too. Of
Mm.
you need to when you are if you do decide to pay a ransom, and we're not advertising that, or we don't get
Mhm.
pissed off with the
Right.
FBI. What will upset the FBI is if you're paying a country that's on the OFAC sanctions list.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
So be careful if you are who you're paying, so you don't wind up with a new problem. And now the
Yep.
FBI is talking to you.
And I can step through that with you if you'd like here. That OFAC list is a list of terrorists, and basically you are in trouble for funding a terrorist organization if you pay a ransom to somebody on that list. Most of the major threat actors are on that list. So, it's like, okay, I need to pay the ransom to get back up, but, OFAC says I can't. Well, number one, how do you know that the threat actor's on that list? Well, whatever company you're using, for paying that ransom that's facilitating that, whether it's Coveware, whether it's, another company that does that, uh, you know, they should be able to look that up for you and find out. In addition, your cyber legal, which you always should engage specific cyber legal for a incident response. When you're dealing with something that is like ransomware or like a major kind of data breach, you should be bringing in cyber legal. And when I say cyber legal, a lot of people will just say, okay, I'm gonna bring in general counsel. Don't
You
just
want it
bring in,
outsourced.
find a
You want
real
that
cyber
all
legal
through
firm.
attorney-client privilege.
Yep.
And yeah, and if your general counsel is also the CFO, which
Yep.
is what it is at a lot of companies,
Yep.
like, just because they watch 3 seasons of Law and Order does not make them a lawyer.
Right.
No, it's a good point. Well,
Yep.
we're about out of time. If there's not any further questions, Art, anything you want to leave them with, how they can find you?
Yeah. Airiam.com is our website. You can find me on LinkedIn, Art O'Kane, and I look forward to hearing from everybody.
And for those of you listening, it takes real cojones to be willing to get up here and talk about this stuff and be be honest about, like, hey, this is what the socks look like. This is what you need to be careful of. Like, they're one of the good ones. So for those of you watching, look forward to the next episode. And also, if you're interested, love to have you on the Blue Team Warrior podcast, blueteamwarriorpodcast.com. You can sign up. Love to interview you and put you on that podcast as well. So thank you all, and catch you on the next episode.
Right.